Hi everyone and welcome back to Playlist Pages. Today we're discussing the furthest distances I've traveled by Leontia Flynn. This is another poem on the Edexcel A-level English literature curriculum, and with that let's dive straight into the summary and then the analysis. The furthest distances I've traveled explores the idea of journeys as both physical and mental ones. The speaker is a person who has traveled a lot and given up stability in favor of freedom for all her life, but towards the end of the poem she realizes that she has now matured and values emotional journeys just as much as physical ones. It's a personal and emotional poem that discusses the speaker's experience while also discussing themes of identity, change, the passage of time, the past and present, and society. It can be compared to poems like The Deliverer, Look We Have Coming to Dover, An Easy Passage, History, or To My 9-Year-Old Self. And with that, let's dive straight into the analysis. Like many folk, when first I saddled a rucksack, feeling its weight on my back the way my spine curved under it like a meridian. So the title helps communicate that the poem will deal with travel and the idea of very far away places, of the furthest distances I've traveled. The poem is written in free verse, showing that there's a lack of stability, but occasionally there are half rhymes, much like sometimes there are bursts of stability and bursts of settling down just before the speaker quickly moves on. Saddled a rucksack and back, feeling its weight on my back in the first two lines, and it accentuates the speaker's point. It gives it a rhyme, a pattern of sound. It's reminiscent to the way that people climb mountains or hike hills, the way they climb up these like tall places with a rhythm, with like a beat in their step to help keep them focused, much like the speaker is giving her an occasional beat throughout the poem to help keep herself focused on the idea of journey. The half rhymes also subvert expectations because they give a feeling that this poem isn't entirely whole, and we have all these associations and positive connotations of travel, that someone who travels a lot is this very self-fulfilled person because of course you need money to travel, and also that they have experienced a lot of culture and and really widened their horizons and broadened their view. And this is contrasted here with the idea that maybe the speaker doesn't have her life entirely together. The notion of not really having a home links in as well, because she's always in between places, in between airports, and the stanza length is also irregular, just like her life settling down in certain places is also irregular. She doesn't stay in one place for long, in other places she suddenly stays for longer. Like many folks, suggests that she's just like everybody else, but we realize that the speaker's life is far from average. It's a very unique choice she has made because most people want to travel, but she has made it a way of life. She has built her life around travel rather than travel around her life. She saddles the rucksack like one would saddle a horse. It's her trusted bag and she always leads and takes it to new places. The weight on her back is almost like a comfort. Usually a weight is something heavy, something uncomfortable, but she finds stability. She finds peace in the way her spine curves under it. The use of dashes here shows how she reflects on the way her bag impacts her spine, which matches the reflective tone of this entire poem as she reflects on whether the whole experience traveling has been positive or not. It also reflects how she has almost become one with the bag, and there's a lack of really figurative language. It's mostly simple, down straight to the point. There's no really consistent use of poetic devices, but the simile here of curved under it like a meridian is significant because a meridian can be both in the body and as a significant like geographical curve. It's a link to the line that splits the earth, much like her life is constantly split apart by the travel and by the before, stability of childhood and home and no travel, and after, constant travel, constant new places, constant cycle of new relations. Her bag is also very heavy because it fits all of her belongings. She doesn't have many because she's always traveling. She never has a chance to settle down. Metaphorically, it could also be a symbol of her adult self. Whereas before she was a child and her bag was light, now she has acquired adult problems that she must deal with, and so hence her bag is heavy. And the tone of this stanza in general is quite nostalgic because we realize that she's planning on settling down potentially, so this is like a way to reminisce on the times when her bag was a part of her spine. I thought, yes, this is how to live, on the beaten track, the Sherpa path, between Krakow and Zagreb, or the Siberian white cells of scattered airports. She's trying to prove and validate her own opinion by saying, yes, this is how. It's an assertion. She's asserting that this is how she wants to live. She's affirming that this is the way to live, perhaps for everyone. The use of the past tense of thought also perhaps indicates that she might have changed her mind. It's interesting to compare it with another poem and talk about how much the speaker's views have changed and how much they have actually traveled in terms of emotional distances too. On the beaten track, so that's a reworded phrase, off the beaten track, this shows that it's not actually unique, that many people have been there before, that I'm sorry to use stereotypes, that every single hippie in their 20s who can afford it has also traveled that exact same path and thought that they were so unique in not settling down and finding a home. It's where younger people go to find themselves a unique identity, not realizing millions of people have been there before them. The reference to the Sherpa Pass, this suggests adventures in the mountainous symbols, and mountains are of course a symbol of challenges. It has very positive connotations in that I've traveled the Sherpa Pass, so I've surpassed all these difficulties. I've climbed over all these challenges, leaving them behind in a trail of dust. The use of proper nouns in places like Krakow or Zagreb, it adds a very real quality to the entire poem. It grounds it. It shows us that this is realism. It's not fantasy. It's a part of her life. The Siberian white is compared to airport cells, so it shows the links between the places, but also her seclusion and her experience of loneliness. That there's scattered airports, there's scattered hubs of activity, because this is a very lonely path to tread since she has no friends and no family that she can really truly bond with. In many of these places, she was alone. I mean, Siberian has connotations of isolation and geographical isolation too, because it's in the very, very north and it's cold and it's frightening to end up there alone and ill-prepared for the weather and other unexpected occurrences like wild bears. Whereas airports are usually more developed places, so it shows how although the world is connected in many ways she's still very alone when she travels to these unique places and she leaves these airports far behind. There's a contrast between airports and comfortable places and the Siberian white, where she's almost alone facing nature. It came clear as over a tannoy that in restlessness and anonymity was some kind of destiny. There's a somewhat regular rhyme here, which shows how structured life actually was without her realizing it, because in travel there's also a sort of structure, as much as she didn't want to admit it. Her journey was in anonymity, showing how it was very hidden of experiences, very ignorant in the things that she had thought. It's ignorant in how much we believe that we're growing up in the process of learning about our younger self, because discovering a new thing about yourself does not always mean that you're growing up. And this is what she's commenting on here, that just because she's visited more places doesn't mean that she has necessarily become an adult now, that she has become wiser. A tannoy is a big speaker in public announcements. She thought she could find herself in the anonymity, in going to places where no one has been, places no one has known. And she did end up doing it, seeing it like some kind of destiny coming from the loudspeaker. When they say, oh, this plane heading to Siberia, you can board it now, she thought, this is it, this is destiny, this is my sign. The enjambment in anonymity is particularly unusual. It indicates her confusion because of all the experiences, perhaps because she never gave herself the chance to process them, just jumping from one thing to the next. There's a mixture of mundane spiritual reflections here, as a tannoy, a big speaker, somehow seems to give a revelation about herself. So she's letting others, a loudspeaker, define her rather than really taking the time to define herself for herself. Anonymity fractured highlights the realization made that her life is fractured and lonely. She sees that loneliness as her destiny. Concerned about the modern world, she becomes even more isolated, and she realizes that all that tannoy stuff and the anonymity has really made it so. So whether it was the scare stories about Larium, the threats of delirium and boldness that led me not to a Western Union wiring money with 6 words of Lithuanian, we have a volta next, a shift, a change in ideas. Larium, stories about Larium, is a name for an anti-malarial drug. So she was forced to listen for scare stories about drugs she would probably need if she was traveling to a different country. And the consequences would be delirium, meaning madness, and boldness. Boldness is actually the loss of hair and the loss of youth, and delirium is the psychosis, the loss of sanity, because people thought she was insane for leading this life. The sibilants in the alliteration of scare stories show how perhaps the people around her whispered furiously that she shouldn't be doing it, concerned for the fact that her way of life was very different, concerned for the fact that she's taking risks that she's perhaps not being fully aware of, even though she was. She just chose to ignore them, believing that she was treading the path towards self-discovery. She's not sure if it's the scare stories in the end that lead her not to a Western Union wiring money with 6 words of Lithuanian, but to a post office. So Western Union is a money transfer service that people use when they don't have a proper bank account. or when they want to avoid the extremely high commission between wiring money from one country to the next. Spoken from true experience. It's not quite like a real bank account that is stable, secure, and respectable, and so there's a sense of adventure in this old-fashioned practice way of wiring money and not using the established institutions, and again just this desire to be different, to not be like other people in the things that she does. She does all this without properly knowing Lithuanian, showing that she's relying on fate to help her survive essentially, and eventually she's not wiring money but rather is led to this post office with a handful of bills or a gyro. And why, if I'm stuffing smalls hastily into a hodl, I'm less likely to be catching a Greyhound from Madison to Milwaukee. There's a sharp contrast between the previous verse and this one. The poem transitions into a more realistic and adult version of the world in which we see the problems that really pile up for her. The harsh experiences no one talks about, if you will, because a gyro is a reference to when people signed on. That means they registered as unemployed in order to get unemployment benefits. The benefits came on a gyro check. A gyro bank would be like a state bank, and then people would it would be like a statement, and then people would take that statement to get their unemployment benefits. And of course she's unemployed because she has never really taken the chance to settle down and develop her career skills. Rather, she has chosen to embrace herself and her life rather than the corporate sphere, so of course she's unemployed. A hodl is a small bag, so she's stuffing a small amount into a small bag, realizing how urgently she needs the money, that she can't afford to lose it, she can't afford to have someone steal it, and it's a small bag because physically she doesn't want to have big things, because she's always on the move, and she can't afford to have big things either because again she's always in the move and she doesn't have money. All of it is spent on travel. She's realizing she's running out of money, but as the poem continues, we realize that she's also running out of the desire to continue leading this kind of life. She doesn't know why it's beyond her, why if she's receiving money from benefits, she's now less likely to spend it on travel. Then to be doing some overdue laundry is really beyond me, really beyond her. However, when during routine evictions, I discover, so now she's realizing that she has all this laundry to do, her bags carry dirty clothes, and in the stanza her voice lacks a clear purpose. She's confused by the situation, by routine evictions. Evictions are when you're kicked out of a house, so she's becoming used to the idea that now even if she wants to settle into an old life, it might be too late because she doesn't have the money to afford paying her rent. She doesn't have the money to afford a stable home. She's feeling a bit regretful, perhaps is the correct word to say it, that she has not really thought about it when she was out there trying to discover herself. But at the same time, she has something to remember in her 20s, and even through this harrowing experience, which she has regrets about, she still manages to discover something new. Alien pants, cinema stubs, the throwaway comment on a post-it, or a tiny stowaway pressed flower amid bottom drawers. I know these are my souvenirs. She's looking at the things that surround her and she's realizing these are my memories. Alien pants, pants she no longer recognizes, pants from a stranger, cinema stubs to movies she's seen on other places, or maybe a comment or a little hidden flower stowaway. That's when she knows these are her memories. And from these crushed valentines, this unraveled sports sock, that the furthest distances I've traveled have been those between people, and what survives of holidaying briefly in their lives. In short, it's not about the places, it's about the people. There's a juxtaposition between actual travel and spiritual travel. Again, a contrast between material and non-material wealth, something like memories, a change in attitudes, a growing up. There's hollow phrases. It's expressing a complex idea, all of these things we've talked about in this video, in a single phrase: the furthest distances I've traveled. She doesn't have to explain the significance of all these things. It's simple, there's not much to analyze. They're movie tickets, they're post-it notes, but they're memories, and they represent a part of her identity, of who she is. The crushed valentines show her that she had many flings, many romances on the way, and even if it all didn't work out, she was still changed and impacted by every single person she met. The furthest distances, so the biggest change for her as a person came from the people around her. The final line is in a way sad, holidaying briefly in their life, because it shows that she has moved away, but her experiences remain. These little keepsakes show her that perhaps she doesn't actually want the wide variety of places visited. She wants a wide variety of friendships formed and new connections made, and people that make you happy or change you or inspire you in her life. She wants to have a community, and she's realizing now that Although she can perhaps no longer travel because she can't afford it, or perhaps because she doesn't have the desire to, now she has the desire to stay behind, and she can apply her efforts to form a community with those around her, to discover something new. This is how she can begin a new journey, by settling down. In a way, it's her ultimate journey because she begins to explore something that she has never before explored: responsibility and consistency, and creating genuine relationships, knowing that you have to live with this person and you're not going to be gone in a week. So I think that was just a very, very interesting thought from what was seemingly an incredibly brief and short poem. And it really gives you a lot to think about, because I feel like recently, because of the media, we all have like this incessant need to feel that if we're not traveling, we're somehow actively failing. But sometimes in your life, you don't need to travel. Sometimes you need to settle down and focus on what you already have. And I don't think it's a good thing to feel guilty about it. And I like this poem because it shows us the value and the importance of traveling. But it also reminds us that sometimes the real treasure is at home, just like Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video and this poem. I hope you stick around. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.